Good morning and welcome to our first ONlit session of this school year. So our back to school organizing for instruction. My name is Jordan Sloan and I am the French project lead for ONlit. And we did this webinar in French last week, but our friends in the Francophone School Board are back at school this week. So we are here to chat with you in English, and I'm here with Leigh. I'll let her say good morning and hello.
Good morning, I'm Leigh Fettes, and I'm joining you from Huntsville today, and I'm an ONlit team member, and it's great to be here with you.
And we are going to start with our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that ONLIT's work takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work on this land, and we are thankful to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people for their care for and teachings about the earth. This acknowledgement reminds us of our responsibilities to our relationships and to the ancestral lands on which we learn, work, and live. If you are new, welcome. Welcome to ONlit. This is our third year. We are excited to get going with this third year. And we prioritize research-driven practices in Ontario schools with that goal to bridge research and practice to support equitable student outcomes. So it's an honor and privilege to be able to do the work that we are doing and to join you this morning. And we do have a pretty packed 90 minutes to spend with you, a little bit of some interaction as we go, a chance for you to take notes. We really are focusing on organizing the classroom for learning. We're going to talk about some success guidelines and rules. We are going to talk about behavioral expectations, how to actively monitor behavior, reminders using pre-corrections, providing abundant feedback, and teaching for success. So a little bit different from what we usually do with an ONlit webinar, where we're really focused on literacy and that language block. We're really going to focus a little bit more on organizing for success. And we are basing a lot of this on the work of Dr. Anita Archer. And some of these presentations are actually taken from those designed by Anita Archer herself. So we are really relying on that explicit instruction, that great book, especially chapter 4 in here. We're also taking a lot from Just Tell Them, which is a fantastic, very small little book that is jam-packed with amazing stuff. So if you want a quick little read, you could do it in an afternoon. I'm sure I've got notes and colors all over mine. But lots of great stuff pulled from in there as well. Videos that illustrate explicit instruction can be found at www.explicitinstruction.org. Anita Archer is fantastic, Lisa, you're right. And there's nothing quite like seeing it in action. So we are going to talk about a lot of things, but really encourage you to go check out that site and see all of this in action.
Right, and so before we begin, we thought that we'd share our thinking around the purpose of our session today, recognizing that we're all in different places with our learning in this area. And with that in mind, we'd like to first affirm what you might already know about the organization of instruction in support of student learning. That is the background knowledge that you already have on this topic. Secondly, we will be reminded of what we might already know, but perhaps have forgotten or haven't included in our practice in some time. And finally, we hope to help provide an update or expand our current understanding, perhaps providing new information for your consideration as you plan for the upcoming school year. And what a great time for us to be digging into this together. And in fact, later on in our session today, Jordan, we will perhaps talk about a podcast that Jordan recently shared with me, and the episode title reminded us of the power of working with what we were talking about today, and the instruction from the very beginning, getting this right from the very start. And the title of that podcast is actually Start the Way You Mean to Finish. It's incredible. And we thought we'd begin our time together with what has become known as one of the Archerisms, on the incredible role that educators play in student learning and in outcomes. How well I teach equals how well they learn. And this can be really quite heavy if we spend time considering this statement, and especially if we consider our students who perhaps haven't learned all that we might have wanted them to learn. But let's today spend the time considering the potential in that statement. That teaching well can help to ensure that students learn the skills and knowledge that they need for academic and future success. It's not just what we teach, the content, but how we teach, our instructional behaviors and routines. and that all have the potential to maximize student learning. So we're going to begin by considering where our topic today fits in with what we know about instruction and learning. And we're going to begin with the science of learning. That is what we know about how people learn, remembering that learning is a permanent change in long-term memory. Cognitive science provides us with decades of information on memory and learning. And next we have the science of instruction. These include the elements of explicit instruction. And finally, curriculums, all of our content areas. The critical content. Many of us have done a fair bit of learning over the past few years about reading and perhaps more recently about writing and math. Other subject areas such as science and social studies help to provide students with the powerful knowledge that become background knowledge as students learn more in these areas. And finally, of course, behavior management expectations and expectations so that other learning can occur. Dr. Archer encouraged us to consider these as a curriculum content area that must be explicitly taught and practiced. The problem is that perhaps we don't always tend to think that this needs to be taught and assume or expect that students just know the expectations. But in fact, knowing how to enter the classroom, how to work with a partner, reply using choral responses, all of those things require explicitly teaching and abundance of practice. And we do this certainly because it allows our classrooms and schools to run smoothly and safely, but equally importantly, because these conditions are what help to ensure that learning can occur. Jordan, I'm so sorry. Can I ask you to back up? I actually meant to just quickly review the elements of explicit instruction.
This one here.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So I think what I'm going to do is we are going to read the portions that are bolded together. And of course, this is just an overview of the 13 elements of explicit instruction. We could spend a week, as Una and I did, learning about each of these in detail. But, just to sort of set the stage today and to remind ourselves of the elements of explicit instruction, we will read the bolded parts together. Okay, so everybody at your home, you don't have to unmute yourselves, but I would love for you to read out loud, which we know that Dr. Archer encourages that active participation. So this is a great example of us doing that. So the first is under content, and we will focus on what, everyone? Critical content. And I hope I saw lips. Oh, I did see lips moving. We will, everyone, break down new material into smaller steps. And when we look at the design of our instruction, we will design organized and focused lessons. We will begin lessons with a clear statement of the lesson goals. We will begin by reviewing prior skills and knowledge before beginning instruction. Provide step-by-step, everyone, demonstrations, of course, that very famous I do. We will provide opportunities for guided practice, the we do. We will constantly check student understanding, the you do. And when we think about the delivery of our instruction, we want to ensure that we elicit frequent responses. We want to monitor student performance. And we want to provide immediate affirmative praise and informative, corrective, everyone, feedback. We want to ensure that we deliver the lesson at a brisk or perky pace. And finally, with practice, we want to ensure that we provide judicious practice. Wonderful. So just a brief overview of the 13 elements of instruction. Great. If you could move to the video now.
Well, we could actually take explicit instruction and put it into two areas. One is the design of the instruction, and the other is the delivery of the instruction. And the design of the instruction means that we pick important content to teach them. We break it down into obtainable pieces, but then our lessons are organized so that more learning could occur. For example, I often talk about 3 major steps in teaching children skills and strategies, where I do demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. I do it, we do it, you do it. And many of the skills and strategies we teach would follow that pedagogy. But it also means that the students are not only directly taught it, but they have practice. And actually, I'm going to tell you, my concern is often that we're not giving adequate practice. I have constantly hear people say, well, you know, Anita, that is just drill and kill, drill and kill. And I can tell you, we have no reported incidents of children dying of practice. Instead, look at the research, the abundant research from cognitive science and from learning on practice. The students need deliberate practice where they're practicing with a purpose. They need practice that is spaced over time, not all in one session. And they need to retrieve information in that practice. So it's a combination of very explicit instruction with I do it, we do it, you do it, followed with deliberate and spaced practice and retrieval. But here's what I've noticed. I've had the great blessing of teaching for 52 years and do demonstrations all throughout every year. And what I have noticed is that students need better delivery skills than we've done in the past. For example, all instruction needs to be interactive. I say something, you say something, I write something, you write something. All explicit instruction would be very interactive with students actively engaged throughout the entire lesson. And we would give them, we'd monitor and watch their responses, give them feedback on the responses, and we would maintain throughout the whole lesson a very perky pace. So those are some of the attributes of having very explicit instruction. And we know that then I set you up for your ability to solve authentic problems. I set you up for being successful. I set you up to generalize information to other situations. But this means we got to keep the teach and teacher. And we have to provide the teaching that our students need. So let us never forget the research on explicit instruction, because if learning is our goal, then a lot of explicit instruction needs to occur there.
Wonderful. I mean, I think we could all listen to her all day, and there certainly is an abundance of wonderful video footage of her. But that's just a brief overview and a bit more detail about some of the 13 elements of explicit instruction. We just showed a portion of the video, but of course it's only 5 minutes long, and it serves as a great reminder and overview, or it can help us to explain what explicit instruction is to others.
All right. So moving into our first big piece of our agenda, organizing the classroom for learning. And we're going to start with that simple but really essential question. How can we organize our classroom space in a way that supports both learning and positive behavior? And Anita Archer reminds us you can often tell right when you walk into the classroom whether the environment is conducive to learning. So in other words, the physical space sets the stage for how our students behave and how well they learn. And so that said, our aim is to create an orderly environment that promotes orderly behavior, but one that's welcoming and pleasant for both us and for our students. And this really starts with that clear organization of space. So thinking about designating areas for specific activities. Where are we going to have that whole group instruction? Small group? Are we going to have rug activities? Are we going to have quiet reading areas, free choice activities? And just as important as having those zones is communicating clearly the behavioral expectations for each of these zones. So as we're coming very close now to the end of the month, our classrooms for the most part are still empty, or, we're kind of in that mid setup. I can see some of you in there now. Anita Archer really encourages us to resist that temptation of the trendy themes or of those overly elaborate setups, and instead challenges us to focus on the question of how can you organize your classroom for learning? She outlines several practical considerations. So these are on pages 111 to 113 of her book. And really, we're thinking about teachers giving instruction from the front of the room. And Anita Archer really calls that the instructional arena, which I can wrap my head around really, really well when I picture that growing up with a whole lot of hockey. Desks are best arranged in rows and not in groups. We want our students to be facing the teacher and facing the board without having to turn all the time. We want them to interact easily with a partner, but be able to stay focused with minimal distractions. We as teachers should be able to move around freely. We should be able to see every part of the room. There should be no visual or physical barriers. And our materials should be accessible for us, for our students. We shouldn't be crowded or disorganized. We should be able to get what we need fairly quickly. And then just tell them, Zach Rochelle really reinforces this thinking. He writes, one of the lowest hanging fruit to prevent disruption is to make a seating plan with students seated so they are facing the source of the information, the teacher and the board. So rows then give us that direct eye contact with every student. It makes it easier for us to monitor attention and engagement throughout the room. And these are some of the layouts that Anita Archer provided. And you can take a look at some of them and you can adapt them based on your classroom size, number of students, grade level, all of that. But the traditional row setup remains one of the most effective configurations for explicit instruction. Our students face the teacher, they face the board, distractions are minimized, and it's easier to maintain that attention. Another option is that double U setup. And that's great. That encourages that discussion or collaboration. But Anita Archer reminds us here that we want to move that desk at the back center of the U to get space for us to be able to circulate. And it then gives us that clearer sight line to all of our students. No matter which seating plan layout you use, there's one other important element, and that's the seating plan. And in Just Tell Them, Zach writes, providing students with an assigned seat via seating chart is also important. Just as a child will choose candy over broccoli if given the option, many students will choose to sit in the back of the class so they can lay low and next to their friends so they can socialize. It's showing empathy, not cruelty, to assign students to the seat that maximizes their attention, not least because it relieves them from the immense social pressure of having to choose between friends and learning. So, in other words, our seating plan is not about control, it's about care, right? Left to their own devices, some of our kiddos are going to, go straight to the back and they're going to sit between friends, and that might make it harder for them to stay engaged. So a couple of practical strategies. In our elementary classrooms, we could label our desks with student names right from the start. So one approach that Leigh talked about that she used was having her students design name tags using warm and cool colors, attach them to the front of the desk with magnets, and that helped her. It also helped with supply teachers. It gave students some ownership over their space, and it doubled as an art-based formative assessment at the beginning of the year. In secondary, you can number desks. You can create a seating chart with desks numbered, and you could even use student names. Hand students their seating assignment as they walk in. You could keep a copy of the class seating chart. You could ask students to keep that same copy, allowing them to learn their classmates' names and setting that tone of structure right from the beginning. And that podcast we're going to tell you about does provide really good examples, both of secondary and of like right back down to kindergarten in terms of routines for entering the room and some of the procedures and organization. So it's a really good one to take a listen to. It's nice and quick. Another thing we want to think about when we're organizing is the void and the time and optimizing that academic learning time, right? Anita Archer says to us, avoid the void for they will fill it. The link between how we use that time in the classroom and what students learn is incredibly strong. What we're aiming to optimize is what we call that academic learning time, that time in which our students are actively and successfully engaged in meaningful academic tasks. So to do this, a couple of simple, powerful principles: plan your activities and their duration in advance. Clearly communicate the expected time for each task and stick to your schedule. So we're going to avoid transitions that drag. We're going to avoid lessons that run over or unnecessary downtime. Anita Archer says time is like money. When it's spent, it's gone. And time that is wasted is gone. And just like money, time has great value in education. And this means we need to be intentional, not just about what our students are doing, but about what they're doing it on. And Leigh gave this example. Yes, students creating Google Slides might appear engaged, but if they're busy choosing colors and fonts instead of thinking about what the content is, that's not really the engagement we're looking for, right? Take something like a U-Fly lesson. If you're using that U-Fly program, each component has a defined timing. It is easy to go over. It's easy for those things to drag out, especially when students are participating and really enjoying that task. But these little overflows open the door to off-task behavior later. Also, it is really set with the intention with the timing. So thinking about that as well. A simple tool, get a timer. You can use it for yourself, you can use it for your students. It keeps everyone in a rhythm and it reduces any of those wasted minutes. Also, remember that too much time can be just as disruptive as too little. So, when we give more time than is needed, we unintentionally invite students to disengage. They get distracted, they start those side conversations. Being intentional with our time creates that safe and structured learning environment. Oh, you're muted.
Muted. Out of practice. We are going to take a look at big idea number 2 now, which is to establish success guidelines and rules. Dr. Archer did note that classroom rules can also be thought of in reference as expectations, and that either of those terms is just fine. She knows that sometimes we like to save that word rules for something quite specific. So expectations works just as well. So well-designed behavioral guidelines not only help to create a safe and positive learning environment in which we can teach and students can learn, but it also helps to make our lives as teachers quite a bit easier. And in fact, Archer goes as far as to say that it provides that little extra bit of sanity, perhaps, to our day. We want to establish success guidelines that we would like our children to reach, thinking of them as the overarching behavioral expectations. These guidelines reflect the values that we hold for students that enrich their lives both in the present moment and settings, but that will also make a difference for their futures. If we establish and emphasize those now, the hope is, of course, that students will use them and to guide them throughout their lives. And we might think of these as behavioral guidelines for success. These values or success guidelines are held by staff members and students, and they are the core of classroom management. Students are more likely to exhibit desired behaviors when expectations are clear and practiced. We should also consider the role that these guidelines can play, perhaps more school-wide as well, in determining a school's culture. In an analogy that can help us to understand the big idea, a guideline might be that drivers, of course, should be courteous. A rule or expectation might be that drivers adhere to the speed limit, if it's 50 kilometers per hour, and stop for pedestrians at crosswalks. Expectations, or the rules, are observable and measurable. And some brief examples for both secondary and elementary. Elementary, respect others, be responsible, do your best work, cooperate with others. And in secondary, be respectful, be responsible, be a good citizen, and be ready to learn. And of course, those are just, some examples. There are many, many out there. These are learned behaviors and they must be taught. Other examples might include be prepared, be polite, be productive, and be positive. Other ones might include respect ourselves, respect others, respect property. And when we think about rules or expectations, we want to state specific behavioral expectations that help to create that safe, productive, and kind environment. When establishing rules and expectations, the following can help to guide us. It is desirable to have few rules rather than too many. They should state the desired behaviors in a positive way. We want to ensure that the wording is short and simple, beginning with a verb, and they should be observable and clearly define the behavior. Some examples from CHAMPS, which is a positive and proactive means of promoting classroom management, are come to class every day, that you are not seriously ill. Of course, that might require some reviewing. Keep your hands, feet, and objects to yourself. Follow directions the first time they are given, and stay on task during all work time. Some secondary examples could include come to class on time, bring only the necessary materials, be prepared, participate in the learning activities, listen to others, and be polite with your words and actions.
We did have a great comment in the chat that I just wanted to bring up, is that we do need to to break down exactly what we mean by each of these for our students. So just saying be respectful, talking about what we mean, what the expectation is, what we mean by that, what our students mean by that. So I thought that was a great point to add in there too.
That looks like sound like perhaps.
We'll talk about that. Looks like
Mm.
something. So now that the classroom structure is clear, we're going to turn to something essential for smooth classroom functioning, routines. I am a routine gal. I love routines. So what it is, a routine is really quite simply a sequence of behaviors done frequently to ensure effective functioning. In other words, routines are what keep the classroom and me running smoothly, both academically and socially. Every activity, whether it's related to learning, movement, classroom logistics, deserves clear and consistent behavioral expectations. And just like academic content, these expectations need to be explicitly taught, practiced, and reinforced. So we can't assume students are just going to know what to do. And I feel like, especially as we move into that grade 3, 4, 5, we kind of just expect that our students will know what to do. And coming into the first week of September, and I've been out of the classroom in a coaching role for a little while, it's just going back to that. What is the routine? What is the expectation right from the beginning? When we walk down the hallway, I don't expect that my students will just know what to do, especially after summer vacation. Establishing those strong routines gives that sense of safety and predictability and shared responsibility. And that's what creates those conditions for efficient learning. Predictability, predictability. And once we've established a routine, we can define the behavioral expectations that go with it. And this is what creates that classroom that is safe and productive and kind, and a space where we can teach and our students can learn. The key principle to remember is what you expect is what you'll get. And if you want it, you have to teach it. You can't just hope that it will happen. We need to be clear and explicit and consistent. And this means teaching expectations in the same way we teach any other skill and practicing it often, more at the beginning, but not thinking that our students are going to get it every single day just because we practiced it a lot of times on the first day. We're going to be giving feedback, and we're going to be unapologetic about setting a high bar for behavior. There's a saying you might have heard, and it's worth holding on to: schools get the behavior they tolerate. So it's up to us to set that tone early, to get that clear, supportive, and consistent framework that tells our students, this is how we do things here because your learning matters. The most effective routines, so we're going to break this down, are ones that students can follow independently without our constant intervention. Appropriate behavior is far more likely in classrooms where the expectations and the procedures are really clearly taught, especially during those first few weeks of school. And again, I keep coming back to this podcast we're going to share with you. It goes right into that and how it's practiced over and over again until our students get it. So some key steps to setting up those expectations that actually work. The first one is determining situations where clear expectations or procedures are needed. So ask yourself where we need those specific expectations. Think of all the critical points in your day. So entry exit routines, transitions, whole class instructions, small groups, partner works, independent work, anywhere that really has that potential for confusion or for disruption. That's where we need to get in those clear expectations. Step 2 is going to be to define the expected behavior. What exactly do you want students to do? What does that look like? What does it sound like? What words, actions, attitudes are appropriate in that situation? Expectations should be clear, and promote self-responsibility, and they should be realistic to use consistently. Step 3, teach the expectation explicitly. And this is the step that we cannot skip. Just like our academic skills, we need to model the behavior, we need to practice it together, we need to give immediate feedback, and then we need to reteach as needed. And this upfront investment is going to save us hours down the line because we're not re-explaining the same things every day. We're creating that predictable and structured environment where students know what to do and how to do it. Once the expectations are taught, the work is not over. If we want those expectations to stick, we need to reinforce them actively and intentionally. We need to review them regularly. Expectations are not one and done. They need to be repeated, they need to be rehearsed, and they need to be reinforced over and over again, especially in the first weeks of school. So consistency really builds that safety, and predictability builds trust. Step 5 is going to be to monitor proactively, be intentional in observing student behavior. And this allows us to catch things early and reinforce what's going well and make adjustments before small issues become big ones. Step 6 is going to be to give that immediate feedback. Give specific praise when students meet expectations, not just saying good job, but really being specific. What was done well? And also, don't be afraid to correct clearly when expectations are not met. What's interesting is that the research on behavior shows that steps 3 to 6 are parallel to what we use to teach letter sound associations. We teach, review, we monitor, we provide feedback. These are the same steps that we would follow if teaching how to add fractions. They're different curricula, but they follow that same instructional approach. Behavior is really just another subject to teach, and it deserves that same clarity, that same rigor, that same consistency as we use for reading and math. For example, we want to have a clear routine for entering the classroom. And everything I've read this summer has really come back to that entry routine being so important. The research is really clear. When teachers establish that consistent, structured entry routine, inappropriate behavior goes down and academic learning time goes up. Anita Archer cites a study in which teachers who greeted students at the door and set a clear routine gained up to 11 minutes of instructional time. That's not just minutes over the course of the school year, that adds up to days of extra instruction. And the goal is simply to start the lesson in a way that is calm and clear and intentional. So, an example of what we might see in elementary, teachers walk students to a class in a straight, quiet line, occasionally stopping to correct behavior, reminding students of the expectation, voice level 0 in the hallway. Before entering the classroom, we clearly state what is expected. So when we enter, go straight to your seat, keep your hands to yourself, eyes on the board, get ready to learn. In high school, we might stand at the door, greet our students individually, a glance, a nod, a brief comment, a warm but serious tone, signaling that transfer of energy. You're now walking into a space of focused, rigorous learning. And resetting when needed. So for all of our students, all of our age groups, sometimes the routine doesn't go perfectly. In that case, we can try it again. We can exit calmly. We can re-enter the classroom and do it the right way. We're not punishing, we're practicing. And like any routine, it's worth reinforcing. Many schools increase consistency by posting something that's the same all the way through, something like a do now on the board, so that every class is doing the same thing, not the same activity, but a do now as they enter the room. So it's just the expectation that's there. It's simple. Come in, get your materials from the same spot, begin the task immediately. And those do nows, that could be, it's practice, right? It's something that doesn't require us to be teaching something new. It's practicing a skill. Maybe it's a review question from yesterday or a week ago or even a month ago. It kind of doubles up. It gives us an opportunity for that retrieval practice. It sets that clear signal that this is a place where learning starts right away. That well-established entry routine is one of the most powerful classroom management tools that we have, and it reduces that behavior, pulls away those issues, and it wins us back time that we can use to teach.
And in fact, Jordan, I'm going to jump in there simply to, if folks haven't listened to yesterday's Reading Road Trip podcast, Kate's guest actually mentioned that very same sort of routine, that idea of having something from yesterday, a week ago, and a month ago, and just in terms of actually getting that spaced retrieval practice. So if you haven't listened yet, folks, you definitely want to tune into yesterday's episode.
There you go. Another podcast. So we kind of hinted at this coming up. A powerful tool that we can use when teaching a routine is a simple looks like, sounds like framework. So this helps our students to visualize and internalize exactly what is expected, not just what they do, but in how they behave, how they communicate while doing it. So this is an example up here on the board of working with a partner, what that looks like. Two students sitting side by side. Both students are looking at the task or the text. Materials are being shared appropriately. Bodies are facing forward, not wandering around the room. What it sounds like: calm, respectful voices, one person speaking at a time, staying focused, not chatting about off-topic things, no yelling across the room or interrupting others that are nearby. The same looks like, sounds like format can be used for any classroom routine. Think about lining up, think about the bus. Leigh and I think we talked a lot about how this could be a great tool to use when we talk about what it looks like and sounds like on the bus. That transition, moving over to the carpet, cleaning up, independent reading, transitioning between tasks. So it is helpful to do at the beginning of the year, but it also works beautifully when we need to reteach a routine mid-year or maybe after a break. We could even think about maybe putting up a slide or a poster for each key routine showing what it looks like, what it sounds like, introducing and then reviewing those expectations. When the expectations are concrete and visible, our students are far more likely to meet them. So we're going to do a little I do, we do, you do, and talk about classroom routines. And we're going to work through one first. I'm going to work through in the I do a clear classroom transition routine. So we're using Anita Archer's I do, we do, you do model. This approach is rooted in that explicit instruction. We don't assume that our students know what to do. We teach it step by step. And the goal is to teach routines with clarity, simplicity, and consistency. So the 3 C's is what Dr. Archer calls it. Clear, students know exactly what to do. Concise, no over-explaining or ambiguity. Consistent, it's done the same way every time. When we're teaching a new routine, like moving from the carpet to desks or independent work to group work, we're going to use that explicit instruction. We're going to tell them what they're going to do. We're going to model it step by step. We're going to show what it looks like. We're going to check for understanding, ask for responses. We're going to practice, and we're going to give that immediate feedback. And these steps are not just, again, for reading and math. They work just as well for behavior routines. Explicit instruction is for everything. So in the case of our transitions, that's that time that takes us to change what we're doing. We want it to be quick. We want it to be quiet. So I personally myself make a slide. I kind of keep my day organized by having my Google Slides open all the way through and just click through. So then this slide could pop up, get out the materials needed for the next activity, move chairs quietly, move quickly, keep your hands and feet to yourself.
So you might recall that one of the elements of explicit instruction is to elicit frequent responses. We want to ensure that we provide many, many opportunities to respond throughout the day, even within a minute. Effective teachers provide 3 to 5 opportunities to respond per minute. And in fact, it can be even higher if it is a new concept or topic for students and you're building that acquisition. And these opportunities to respond mostly occur perhaps in the form of unison or choral responses. Frequent responses are important because they increase the time that is on task, increase academic achievement and learning, decrease disruptive behaviors, and can increase the intensity of interventions. All students are involved instead of simply those students who put up their hands all the time. But remember, we can't, of course, just expect that students will know or pick up on how to respond chorally. And so this is something that must be taught explicitly and then practiced judiciously. And we're going to show a quick short clip of Dr. Archer demonstrating how she will prompt students to respond chorally so that they are able to do that throughout the day with her. And she provides ample practice opportunities. And she also shows examples of how to ask students to do it again if they don't quite get it right.
First thing, when I teach, I need to have you sitting up. Boy, you're sitting right up, not standing up, but sitting up. And not slumped over, but sitting up. Perfect. Excellent. Good job. And you need to be looking right at me. Oh, good job looking here. And you need to look as smart as you can. Oh, a smile. That was a smart touch. Oh, very good. Oh, hands folded on your desk. That is very smart. Nodding. That shows you're paying attention. Excellent. Ooh, looking very good. So everybody, hang out for just a moment. Lean over, hang out. When I say ready, I want you to sit up, look at me, and look as smart as you can. 1, 2, 3, ready? You're ready? You're ready? You're ready? Hang out one more time. And 1, 2, 3, ready? You're perfect. You're perfect. Excellent. Now, here's something I do that may be a little bit different than your teacher, and that is when I ask a question, students in my class don't raise their hands. So when I ask a question, are you going to raise your hands? Yes or no, everyone? No, unless I say raise your hand. So everybody raise your hand. Then you can do that. But here's what we're going to do instead. When the answers are very short, we're going to say the answers together. I'll ask a question. I will put up my hands. This says think, do not blurt. And when I lower my hands right there, you'll say the answer. Got it? Okay, ooh, good job sitting up. So get ready. So everybody, what day of the week is it? Everyone, it's?
November.
The day of the week is Friday. Oh, I can't believe you'd forget that. Let's try it again. So what day of the week is it? Think. Think. Everyone. Friday. Now let's practice that again. This is think. You don't say it until I lower my hands right there. Okay. So what day of the week is it, everybody? It's? All right. Of course, tomorrow it will be?
Saturday.
I didn't fool you. After Saturday. Perfect. That gives everybody a chance to think. You are so good.
I mean, so many delightful examples in that. And, you know, it probably is worth saying that, of course, it takes practice for us as teachers to deliver our instruction in that way. And so, you know, you might have a stint of where you're doing it really, really well. You're eliciting lots of routines, you're doing the prompts, and then you'll slide back into ways that you might have done things before. It does take practice for us, just as it takes practice for students. And it doesn't come necessarily quickly or automatically, but if we practice judiciously, we will definitely get better at it. And so now if we look at an example of we do, we're going to do that on independent work. We're going to co-create a list of this together. So if students have had instruction and experience with a routine or expectation, for example, if they're in grade 4 and would have been expected to have worked independently, perhaps in previous years or grades, you might be able to establish the expectations for this together as a group with your students. An example of we do. So we will do this as an example together and create this list. So very shortly, we're going to ask you to take a moment and consider what steps or expectations we would want to include when explicitly teaching the expectations for independent work. Once you've thought for a moment, we will ask you to type an example in the chat, but we are going to ask you to please hold off on sharing until we prompt you. This is the waterfall strategy. So please repeat that. Think, type, pause. Everyone? Think, type, pause. Please don't hit send until we ask. So as an example, we're going to give you the first one. It might include take out necessary materials. Okay, so we're going to give you a moment to think, and then you will type, and you will pause, and then we will all share our answers. I like how some of them are very briefly worded. Of course, we want to use less words, be very clear, concise, and consistent with our language. And so you will see a number of these examples that you provided. Thank you for doing that work as we sort of flip through some of the examples that might appear as you co-create this list that we do together around independent work. So take out necessary materials, work quietly, no talking, work hard and complete the task. If you need help, pull out your help sign or help card if that's a routine that you have. Check your work and ask yourself, does it make sense? So some of those are absolutely examples that you provided. Some of them you thought of additional ones. And so that would be an example of co-creating a we do, the expectations around independent work. So if we think about our classrooms, there are innumerable routines and procedures that make up our day that we will want to explicitly teach and practice so that they become automatic. So now we're going to pause and consider the routines and procedures that we will want to establish and practice for the coming year in those early days. And so we are going to ask you in a moment to consider what some of the routines and procedures you will want to include. So we've provided a list of things that you might, but you can see that this isn't everything in a day. You might have routines around entry. Jordan spoke about how important that getting the start of our day right in terms of academic minutes and learning. You might have routines around walking in the hallway. You know, I often think about this one because my students were really solid at walking in the hallway, and that didn't just happen, you know, by magic. That's something that we practiced really hard. So we had a number of solid routines and procedures in place last year in our classroom. We could walk the halls like champions. They were generally quite civil during snack time. Our arrival routine was good, but of course now I know that I could have definitely tightened that up and been more effective from those first few moments within the classroom. But one routine that we did not have, and that in retrospect was a problem throughout the year, was our library time. And so, you know, that might be something that you think about: whole class work time, partner work, gym, library assembly. So we're going to give you a moment to chat with or listen to others about a routine or procedure for the coming year, an opportunity for you to do. We're going to ask that you please stay with us because you can participate in a way that is comfortable for you by talking, typing, listening with your cameras off or on, your choice. There is definitely more great information to come, so please again stay with us. So we're going to place you in groups and ask that you choose as a group a routine or procedure from our list, or perhaps you'll think of another one that you would like to, you know, sort of plan. Perhaps A sounds like, talks like, or points that you could use in your I do explanation or pre-plan what you would want to co-construct a we do with your students. And we do have a template that we will provide you if you'd like to use it to capture this information. And so we will have an example of the looks like, sounds like. We will also have some of those steps that sort of have us point out just the key information about what the routine is and what we would expect to see. Again, if you'd like to use that, it will be there. We'll force a copy, but it's totally optional. We will put that in the chat in a moment. So we will put you again in rooms, and we would love for you to plan or co-create some pieces around a routine that you would like to use or that you believe to be important for your coming school year, knowing that there are many of them. So introduce yourselves and enjoy some time to meet, listen to, and collaborate with other educators. Rose and I were just getting engaged in a what the entry routine might look like. But Rose, hopefully you'll give that some thought and follow the link in the example.
I did. That was one of the biggest things that got me in Just Tell Them, was that the importance of that entry routine. And then I was joking with Leigh just as people are coming back. Right as I found that and was reading that, I was at the gym and this Instagram reel popped up, and it was a guy joking around about how students enter the classroom, and it was like jumping through the room going parkour, parkour extreme, and flipping upside down and jumping off of desks. And they said how 99% of the students will enter your class this fall. And I just thought, yeah, that entry routine, it's like right in my face right now.
Absolutely. And if we think about, you know, certainly how much time can be gained through a really tight entry routine, conversely, we can also think about how much time can be lost throughout a day, but especially throughout a year. I mean, last year I had my students do some math, and they had to determine within a day, a week, a month, and a year how much time was lost if we just wasted or lost 10 minutes a day, which is, you know, conservative, as we now know, in terms of time not spent engaged in learning activities. And so if students lose 10 minutes a day, that suddenly became very close to an hour by the end of the week, 50 minutes. And at the end of the month, that's, you know, 200 minutes. And then towards the end of the year, it was like 5 or 6 days of learning. So if we think about tightening it up and gaining the learning, or if we're not as careful with that time, it becomes time that is then gone. And in a year of maybe record inclement weather days, that is a lot of time on top of time, right? So it really is worth paying close attention to that entry routine.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. I think everybody's made their way back in now. Hopefully, you got a chance to, chat a little bit about what some of those routines might look like. Maybe you got into a lot of detail, maybe a little, but hopefully, it gave you a chance to kind of think about what's coming as you get into the school year. We're going to pop right back into our discussion because we've only got a little bit of time left. Um, and this is in Zach's book again, Just Tell Them. And it's the alternating principle. So we've worked through those routines, the I do, the we do, the you do, that Anita Archer promotes in Explicit Instruction, and that Zach Rochelle references in Just Tell Them. And this gradual release model supports students as they move from watching a model to practicing with guidance to doing it independently. But there's more to it than just the structure. In the early stages of learning, students need more of that guidance, right? They need that heavy guidance. But when we do that, they can also become overloaded. So we don't want to be presenting so much at once. We want to find this little bit of a balance. Um, we want to break instruction into smaller chunks. We want to give students time to process each part. And we want to alternate between concise teacher inputs and frequent student outputs. And this is referred to, this balance is in the Explain Interactively chapter of Just Tell Them. And another key idea from that chapter is that everyone does everything. And I know we hear Anita Archer talk about that too. There's no hands up. We saw that in the video. There's no volunteers because calling on a volunteer or raising hands often benefits our most confident students, our most knowledgeable students, generally the ones who already get it. And the rest sort of stay passive or maybe even get left behind. So we want to make sure we're doing what Zach says, don't teach the best and leave the rest. Instead, we want to use those full class participation strategies. We want to use those choral responses, partner sharing, whiteboards. We want every student thinking and responding, not only maximizing that engagement, but also raising the floor of success for all of our learners.
And Jordan, it sort of makes me laugh, and I'm sure Una can think back to this, but Dr. Archer has a lot of gestures that help remind us of these things. And so we often had to think about inputs, outputs, right? And so she would have us all do that to help us cement how important that concept is. So as you're saying that, I'm sort of doing that to myself over here. Yeah.
And I'm just seeing such great things in the chat. And one of the things I wanted to come back to was what Laura said is educator well-being comes in here, right? Those consistent, predictable routines, yes, they make our lives so much easier with our students. They're so great for our students, but they make our lives more calm. They make our lives a little bit easier when our students, like, I just know the feeling of when my students just walk in calmly is very different to starting with me going, hey, right? That trying to gather attention. When we've got that essential for student learning, right? So important for us as teachers and our own mental well-being as well. I'm seeing so many great things in here about the paradigm shift from the no hands up and the concise teacher inputs and the choral responses. This is so great. I also wanted to just think about it this way, right? That when we think about that effective instruction, and Zach Rochelle talks about push in, pull out, that within that explicit teaching still model is that example problem pair. So a worked example is a step-by-step illustration of how to carry out a task or solve a problem. You show them how to solve the problem first, then follow it with an almost identical one that they solve on their own. And then you repeat that pattern of teacher show, student do, teacher show, student do, push in, pull out, push in, pull out. Students go back and forth through that series of worked examples that push the information in and problems that pull the knowledge out. One of the analogies that is used is not to think of teaching like archery, where you aim and fire the information, but more like tennis, like that back and forth, that constant exchange. It's almost like a rhythm, right? It improves that focus. It creates that predictable structure. Students learn that they will be expected to respond, which increases their engagement.
And
It's
Jordan,
not
it also, if we think back to her principles of explicit instruction or elements of explicit instruction, it allows us to really break it down in those smaller pieces. So I'll teach a little chunk and then students will work with or do something with that. I'll break it down again and teach another little piece. So it really does allow for that, the content piece in our delivery of instruction.
And I think for me, focusing for a long time, even for me as an adult, is just not realistic.
Absolutely.
Whereas focus and then try it, and focus and then practice it. And again, it's not about asking just a few students, right? Everyone does everything. So we've talked about a couple of ways of doing this. We're all into the choral response now. We've seen it in the video. The whole class responds together. It's fast, it's low stakes, it's highly engaging. We model first, we give a brief pause to think, we give a clear signal for everyone, and we give that immediate feedback. We keep it brisk. We got that perky pace as we go through this one. In high-performing direct instruction classrooms, students respond 9 to 12 times per minute, mostly through that choral response. Another option is to use those mini whiteboards with like a 3, 2, 1, show me, right? Every student writes their answer on your signal. They all hold it up. You instantly see who's getting it. No one can coast. Everyone participates. We see the understanding. It makes it really visible for us, and it helps us as teachers to adjust right away. Cold calling is another option. We want to be careful about how we do it, but it's so effective when we do. We want to ask the question first to the whole class. We're going to give that think time, and then we can select a student, anyone in the room. We could, if we wanted to, ask for a show of hands, who could I call on? But we're creating a classroom culture where everyone thinks and everyone participates. So we're not putting anyone on the spot, because that's the expectation all the time, is that everybody fully expects full participation. It's not about putting students on the spot. It's about maintaining that norm that learning is important and everyone is responsible for it. And our big takeaway here really is that students should be actively thinking, talking, writing, solving, working through problems all the way throughout our lesson. They should not just be sitting and watching and listening.
And so another excellent way to elicit responses from students and to encourage active participation is, of course, with turn and talk, or think, pair, share. And so while turn and talk can be tricky to get right, it is well worth the investment, according to Zach Rochelle. When managed well, it leads to a high think ratio in which 50% of the students are actively responding and 50% of students are receiving an additional explanation from their peers. And that comes from page 47 of Just Tell Them. And the reason for this is that it facilitates learning through that self-explanation effect. And it is very fast and very effective. And of course, like everything else, it requires explicit teaching and practice. So to maximize turn and talk, we want to be intentional in our student pairings and, of course, establish that consistent routine. If you've ever attended a Dr. Archer session or seen her in videos, you will see that she uses turn and talk frequently, but it is very well established and laid out as to how this will happen. So for example, in a classroom, we might pair students and then ask them to number themselves, with partner 1 being the partner that is closest to the door, and partner 2 is the partner that is closest to the windows. You might also do, partner 1 is the student with the first name that starts with a letter that is closest to the beginning of the alphabet. And number 2, partner 2 would be further along in the alphabet. There's lots of ways that you can do that. And to ensure that they remember who is who, you might do some back and forth. Partner 1, raise your hand. Partner 2, raise yours. Partner 2, your turn. Partner 1, your turn. So just back and forth to really ensure that students know who is who within that partnership. And then when giving instructions to partners, we want to very clearly, of course, again, clear, consistent, concise language, clearly indicate what each partner is to do, perhaps with a sentence starter. So for example, if we were teaching vocabulary words such as the word persevere, and we wanted to provide opportunities for them to use and practice that word, we might say, 1s, tell your partner about a time that you had to persevere. Begin with, a time that I had to persevere was. 2s, you will listen and go. In a short time later, of course, because remembering that perky pace is important, and if there's a void, they will fill it, we want to ensure that we keep our students on task. And so we would turn it around and say, 2s, now it's your turn. Tell your partner about a time that you had to persevere, and begin with, a time that I had to persevere was, and go. So that really structured and well-practiced turn and talk routine is just another way to have students engaging in the learning, using the words that we want them to learn, doing the things we want them to do to really build and deepen that student learning. Because of course, it's that engaged in academic learning time that we want to maximize throughout our day. So we're going to look at big idea number 4, which is to actively monitor student behavior. And once we've taught the expectations for group instruction, we want to ensure that we are constantly and actively monitoring any time that group instruction is occurring. We intentionally supervise behavior by using our monitoring skills. So for example, I will scan the room to ensure that students are doing what is expected of them. I will look and listen from the teaching arena, totally present with them. I won't, take this opportunity to straighten out a little pile or do something. I will ensure that I am actively looking at students, ensuring and connecting with them, maybe making eye contact, smiling, nodding, giving thumbs up. And we do this because when we actively monitor while we teach, we decrease minor behavior incidents. So again, ensuring that we are constantly scanning and looking throughout the room, looking at facial expressions, ensuring that they're understanding what it is that we're teaching. And of course, we also want to actively monitor during partner and independent work. We begin, of course, by giving that clear directive or instruction, thinking back maybe to the instructions given that we practiced during our turn and talk. And before rushing out into the room to closely monitor, getting up close to students, we want to ensure that we pause and scan the room using eye contact to ensure that students are completing the task. And we sometimes maybe have a habit of delivering the directive and then heading right out to engage with students and check to see where they are with their learning. But that pause and scan is quite important. And that is what helps to ensure that students are doing what we've asked them to do. And of course, after we've done that, we can move out and circulate, walk around, look around, talk around, quietly and privately. And again, why do we do this? Because when we actively monitor during partner and independent work, we decrease minor behavior incidents, and we help to ensure that time is being spent on the desired learning activity or task. And this is a reminder, and I almost had to stop myself from doing it once I gave an instruction earlier here, is that we want to avoid talking over the group, interrupting independent or partner work time. So once a clear directive has been given, we have to resist the urge sometimes to sort of go out there and say an additional thing. So for example, announcing to the group, oh, I see that some of you have forgotten a capital letter or period. Certainly you want to address those things, but you don't want to constantly be interrupting the time that you're providing for partner or independent work.
All right, we got just a couple left. We know we're getting close to the end of our time together this morning, but we've got a few more things to chat about. One is using pre-corrections to remind students of goals and expectations. So simple, powerful tool that's really going to help maintain those routines and expectations once they've been taught, and that's pre-corrections. So imagine I've already taught my class the routine for independent work. We've built the list of expectations together. We've said, stay in your seat and work quietly and use your materials properly, raise your hands for help. But now I'm noticing that my students are slipping. Maybe they're chatting, or maybe they're wandering or forgetting on what we agreed upon. And this is where a pre-correction can come in. And what a pre-correction is, it's a positive, clear reminder of what is expected before the behavior is required. So what it sounds like. Before we start, let's remind ourselves during independent work time, our voices are off, our eyes are on our own paper, and we use our time wisely. So it's a reteaching moment. It's a way to polish that routine and to prevent the behavior slip before it happens. So we're not waiting to correct behavior that comes up, but we're giving our students a chance to succeed proactively. It helps us to keep that positive climate. It helps us to support our students who need those reminders without singling them out. And it helps us to reteach without judgment. And sometimes that's all it takes is just that little reset to get things back on track. If we give the reminder before the behavior, it's a pre-correction. If we give it after, it is a correction. And that difference really matters because pre-correction is preventative. It sets our students up for success. It reminds them of the expectation just before they need to meet it. Of course, even with our routines in place, even with pre-corrections, we're going to have days. There are going to be days where things just don't go perfectly, and that is when we're going to correct. But it is how we correct here that matters the most. So Dr. Anita Archer says sometimes we need to draw from the well of goodness. And I feel like this has been the running joke between Leigh and I this week in preparing here. We don't want to call out our students. We don't want to single out a group. We aim to correct in a way that is quiet, kind, and constructive. So let's say we've already taught and practiced the routine for independent work. The expectation is clear, but I notice there's a student who just isn't getting started. Instead of addressing it publicly, I might walk over calmly, quietly, and say, do you have your pencil and your materials? Do you understand the task? If they do, I can give a nod and say, okay, I'll let you get started, and I'll come back in and check in with you in a minute. This is a correction, but it's rooted in support, not shame. We're really no need for humiliation, right? It doesn't help the behavior. It's never necessary. And it's not that tone that we want. We want that redirection. We want to keep that environment that we're creating. When our kiddos know that our corrections don't come with embarrassment or frustration, they're more willing to stay engaged and to try again. Another way we support student success and keep routines running smoothly is using both visual and verbal pre-corrections. So visual pre-corrections are simple cues that remind students of what's expected right when they need it. So like I said, for me, it's the slide up on the board whenever they have it that has all those steps. It's just a reminder, it's there all the time. Maybe a quick note on why they matter, but they're always up there. I might say things to my students like, tomorrow, when you enter, you're going to see our entry routine written on the board as a reminder of what we do so we can get settled quickly and get right to work. Don't need to give a big speech, just a brief little nudge that, they're up there, brings everything right back to the surface. We could also use verbal pre-corrections. Those can take different forms. I could say, state the expectation clearly. So as we discuss our novel, let's remember to respect the opinions of others by giving them our attention and listening. I might ask students about the expectations. I might say, tell your partner, why do we stay silent when we enter the class after being greeted by the teacher? Or I might have students teach the routine themselves. I might say, if you're partner 1, imagine partner 2 is a new student. Explain what we do when we arrive in the morning. Partner 2, listen carefully and add anything that's missing. These visual and verbal reminders really just help to anchor that behavior that we want right before the students need to use it. They're quick, they're clear, and most importantly, they're proactive. And they remind our students that we have that shared understanding of how we do things, that we revisit and that we reinforce that understanding every day, not just at the beginning of the year in September. So back again, because we all know now how important the entry routine is. This is an example of our classroom entry routine. We've read it, we've practiced it together. It's displayed on the board so everyone can refer to it. We also reinforce it regularly with verbal reminders when needed. This doesn't mean that every student is going to get the routine perfectly every day. I'm still going to, and I have visions of it, this student running into the room doing the parkour, jumping on the desk, right? It's going to happen. But what matters is that we stay consistent with our expectations day after day, and we're going to create that clear and safe learning environment. And we don't have time to show you the clip from this, but the podcast that we've been referencing throughout this episode, there was the Reading Road Trip podcast from yesterday, but also this podcast, Chalk Dust. And this one was a really, really great one about those entry routines. And there are examples from high school, examples right down through kindergarten. Leigh just put the link in the chat. If you can listen to just the podcast, but you can also go through and see the video associated with that. And I do encourage you to take a look at that, especially with kindergarten. It was quite amazing, the kindergarten entry routine that they had on the go there. It was pretty great. And I really also appreciated the correction with the high school example, how that was given in that positive way.
Yes, and what is the one we called is start the way you mean to end. And so that is a really good way to sort of consider and view or listen to that. It is a podcast, but as I listened, so Jordan shared it, I was in my garden, I went back and actually watched it online, just so you can see the examples. So looking at big idea number 6, which is providing abundant feedback. So of course, feedback feeds forward. We might have all heard that from Dr. Archer before. And providing specific praise when behavioral expectations are exhibited is a key to effective classroom management. When positive feedback is increased, inappropriate behavior is decreased. We want to look for the expectations that we've taught and honor them with specific praise. And the desired ratio of positive comments, praise, to redirectives or reprimands or corrections can vary from 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1, and I've even seen 9-to-1, depending on what you read. And there doesn't appear to be a set number that we should aim for. However, you will notice that all of those ratios I've listed had a positive ratio. And we know that some students will benefit from hearing more of them. For example, students who might struggle with making positive behavior choices. We want to ensure the bottom line is that we have many more positive directives than negative ones. So some examples of behavior-specific praise that we might want to use are, for example, great, Maddie, you remembered to raise your hand. Diego, I can tell that you took time to check your answers and to get them right. And Jasmine, I appreciate how you entered the classroom quietly and went straight to your desk. And those come from the IES practice guide on student management. And it is an excellent guide, and we highly recommend that you check that out. And again, drawing from our well of goodness, we want to provide gentle verbal corrections for behavior that is not following expectations. We want to approach the students or groups engaging in the misbehavior and quietly remind them of what they should be doing, the expectation. There's no need to bellow the correction or expectation across the classroom, which I may or may not have done on occasion in the past. So drawing from that well of goodness and approaching the student, engaging that and very quietly restating the corrected or the expected behavior. So our correction should be delivered with few words, using clear language that focuses on the expected behavior and delivered in a way that is calm and respectful. And this sometimes requires a pause and a deep breath on our part if it is something that we have to do frequently. It might sound like this. Group, we know that when we work together, our conversation should be on the learning and the topic. What should we talk about? That's right, the learning and the topic. Simple like that and moving back.
All right, coming to our last section, Teach for Success. And we know we're getting close to the end, but we want to bring it back here to this point. And this is really an essential point, is that success is the greatest motivator. When we teach in a way that puts students in situations where they can succeed, appropriate behavior naturally follows. The more students experience success, the more motivated they are to keep going. And that's why our role is to teach for success with clarity, with kindness, with consistency. Let's think about the cognitive load we place on our students and how learning moves from working memory to long-term memory. And again, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the book, Just Tell Them. The more our students' limited working memory is filled with that irrelevant or distracting information, the less mental capacity they have to focus on what really matters. So to help the learning happen, we need to remove anything within our control that gets in the way. So Anita Archer says it really simply: cut the fluff. This means removing attention-grabbing distractions. And one thing that got me was those highly decorated classrooms. And the research shows that it actually increases distraction and reduces learning, even if it's been several weeks that the decorations have been up. So even 6 weeks in, students are still distracted by those decorations that are up there. Background noise, music, that tends to overload students' working memory, and it makes it harder for them to concentrate. And perhaps most importantly, students lose focus when surrounded by distracting peers. And, we all like to create wonderful, exciting slides, but as soon as we throw up the puppy in the corner of the slide, where does your attention go? Like, how many of you have just completely stopped listening to me and are looking at the movement that is happening in the corner of the slide right now? So it all comes back to teach with passion, manage with compassion. What we teach is important, but how we teach it is just as crucial. When we're bringing together that clear structure, explicit expectations, constant kindness, we create classrooms where every student can learn and grow and succeed. How well students learn is directly linked to how well I teach. So we want to thank you, both Leigh and I want to thank you for taking the time to reflect on your practice and to prepare for a successful year with your students. We are going to stick around a little bit if you do want to stay and chat and have any questions. But otherwise, we want to wish you a wonderful start to your school year. This presentation was recorded and will be in the ONlit resource library in the next few days.
Happy back to school, everyone.